Welcome to EPH 456, where we seek to understand the truth. In John 17:17, Jesus said, "Thy word is truth." This week we continue our verse-by-verse study in the book of Job with part 12. Hope you enjoy. Heavenly Father, we just thank you again for Wednesday. Another opportunity to learn, another opportunity to fellowship. We just ask, Lord, that you would just open up our hearts and our minds as we bow our hearts and our minds to your will so that you may teach us. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. All right, so we are wrapping up some Job. Coming down the home stretch. So tonight is part 12 of Job. Can't believe we have literally been at Job for 3 solid months. I guess that's what a verse by verse will do for you. We're going to begin tonight with the very smallest, and when I mean smallest of recaps. So last week we focused on our new character, Elihu's commentary. And his commentary, I guess, could be summarized in God's justice and sovereignty, the role of suffering that Job was going through. So it could be, and coming from the perspective of this suffering that Job was going through, have you guys considered that it's not just for potential wickedness, but it could be for a chastisement or for a test? Versus what, Job's friends had came to and just assumed that he was wicked based on his suffering. Elihu brings up the possibility that it could be for other things like test and chastisement, and indeed he was right. It was a test. His commentary also focuses on God's transcendence and wisdom, and we talked a little bit about that last week. God's wisdom and power always remain supreme. His ways are past finding out. And then lastly, it was a rebuke of Job's overall attitude and perspective. And what we find, and we'll find again tonight, that Elihu criticizes Job a little bit for speaking without full knowledge and understanding of why this was happening to him, assuming that, he was just, it was that he was comparing his innocence to, I guess, God's justice, or even questioning God's justice. So we ended up last week speaking out, being mindful of our attitude when someone we respect gives us criticism, and taking that criticism constructively and not necessarily lashing out and being open to it in the interest of our improvement and making us better people, and making us a better friend, making us better partners, better parents, all the things. So, criticism is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a necessary thing in order for us to grow. But it is important how it's done and how it's executed, and we need to be mindful of that, as well as we need to be open to it and not necessarily be as defensive as we sometimes can be. So with that, we're going to start Job 34. Elihu further answered and said, "Hear my words, you wise men. Give ear to me, you who have knowledge. For the ear tests words as the palate tastes food. Let us choose justice for ourselves. Let us know among ourselves what is good." So these first 4 verses here, Elihu is setting up the commentary that he's about to get into with an analogy of listening or preparing your ears, and comparing that to your other sense, or one of your senses, tasting, which is how your palate would prepare to taste food. He's saying your ears need to be preparing to hear what I have to say to you. I found that was a very interesting perspective, because For me, I mean, I love food, man. I'm a foodie, I guess you could say. And when you're excited about trying something, you're anticipating it almost. And what Elihu is suggesting here is that we should be anticipating those words and really listening to him and taking them in and digesting them, just like our palate would taste food. So just interesting perspective what he said there. For verse 5, for Job has said, I am righteous, but God has taken away my justice. Should I lie concerning my right? My wound is incurable, though I am without transgression. And these verses 5 and 6, they summarize Job's position. And I want to point this out because this is Elihu speaking now. This isn't Job. Elihu is summarizing Job's position. And he's basically saying here, Job, I recognize that you believe you're innocent and that you want to argue your case for your innocence. So this is a very effective communication tactic, and I would suggest that if you guys aren't doing this, I would suggest that you consider doing it in future in some of your conversations. But one of these techniques, and this is what Elihu did here, is restate what the person said to them before they provided their commentary or their answer. And what you're basically saying to that person subconsciously, so like as an example, let's say I'm in a conversation and you say, hey, the sky is blue. And then I turn around and restate. So let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. You're stating that the sky is blue, correct? And you say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay. That technique of mirroring, okay, does several things for you. Number one, it makes sure that you're not hearing something different than what they're saying. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but what we all have to acknowledge and understand is that sometimes we hear something that they didn't necessarily say. I'm not sure how that works from a mental perspective, but I know for a fact that happens. So when you restate something, you're making it clear to you and them that this is what you mean when you said this. Am I right in saying that? And then if they say no, that's an opportunity for them to correct their position, and then you can restate that correction and go on and the conversation can flow from there. The other thing that it does subconsciously is it lets the other person know that you're listening to them. When you restate what they're saying, it's impossible for them to say, I don't hear you, because I just told you what you said to me. So that also can eliminate some frustration in the conversation, because all of us have been in these conversations where we'll give our opinion and the other person is just kind of sitting around there and you're going, hey, are you listening to what I'm saying? That eliminates all that when that person comes back and says, hey, just make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying X, Y, and Z? That eliminates a lot of that. And that's what Elihu was doing here. He's confirming Job's position to him. Verse 7. What man is like Job, who drinks scorn like water, who goes in company with the workers of iniquity, and walks with wicked men? For as he said, it profits a man nothing that he should delight in God. Therefore, listen to me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God to do wickedness, and from the Almighty to commit iniquity. For he repays man according to his work, and makes man to find a reward according to his way. Surely God will never do wickedly, nor will the Almighty pervert justice. Who gave him charge over the earth? Or who appointed him over the world? If he should set his heart on it, if he should gather to himself his spirit and his breath, all flesh would perish together, and man would return to dust. If you have understanding, hear this. Listen to the sounds of my word. Should one who hates justice govern, will you condemn him who is most just? is it fitting to say to a king, you are worthless, and to nobles, you are wicked? All right, I'm going to stop right there. So what Elihu is doing here in these verses 7 through 18, he's speaking to Job, but he's not just speaking to Job. He's speaking to those other men in the room, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. He's addressing both of them. And if you recall his commentary before, he has specific things that he was addressing with Job's friends, and he has specific things that he was addressing directly to Job. And at this point in time, Elihu, what he's doing is he is proclaiming God's authority when he says things like, surely God will never do wickedly, nor will the Almighty perverse justice. Then he says, who gave him charge over the earth? Or who appointed him over the whole world? So he's trying to get them to understand from a human perspective, we understand beginning and we understand end. Because in some cases, we've seen the beginning of some things and we've also seen that end. So we understand what end and the beginning is. But what he's saying here is that God has no beginning and he has no end. He's all powerful. So who set God in charge of the earth? Who is God's authority? And of course, the answer is no one. So that's a very tough concept for man to understand, because as mankind, we're subject to all kinds of authority. I mean, you're subject to your boss. You're subject to your parents. You're sometimes subject to, your kids in some cases. You're subject to gravity. You're subject to the other laws in this world, momentum. Mankind is subject to all different types of things. But God isn't subject to anything. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants. And man doesn't understand that. So what Elihu is trying to explain to them here is not only can God do whatever he wants, should he decide to remove the gifts that he's given man, it will be instant death for man. And that's what he's saying here in verse 14 and 15. If he should set his heart on it, and if he should gather to himself his spirit and his breath, meaning that the spirit that is in us and the breath that is in us, if God decided to take that back, what would happen? Well, he tells you in verse 15, all flesh would perish together and man would return to dust. So in these comments, what Eliphaz is trying to get all of these guys to understand is that both of you guys are bickering back and forth to trying to figure out who was right. Okay? We respect all of these three guys' position. We've talked about it for months now. And them and Job, they've been saying, okay, Job, we see it like this. Job is saying, no, it's really like this. They're saying, no, we see it like this. And there's the back and forth and back and forth. What Elihu is going to do is he's not taking either side. He's not saying you're right, and he's not saying, Job, you're right. What he's looking at it is he's trying to get them to look upward so that they can start to understand their position from God's perspective, which is something that, is very humbling. All right, verse 19. Yet he is not partial to princes, nor does he regard the rich more than the poor, for they are all the work of his hands. Interesting verse. In a moment they die. In the middle of the night, the people are shaken and pass away. The mighty are taken away without a hand. For his eyes are on the ways of man, and he sees all his steps. There is no darkness, no shadow of death, where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves. For he need not further consider a man, that he should go before God in judgment. He breaks in pieces mighty men without inquiry. All right, I'm going to stop right there. So a couple things that he's about to start to hit on as it relates to Job. See, Elihu's position or opinion on where Job sits right now is, and we'll talk a little bit about it as he kind of really hones in on it. But Job has said, I'm righteous, I'm righteous. And these other guys are saying, no, Job, you're not righteous. Job is saying, no, I am righteous. And they're going, no, Job, you got boils on. All your family's dead. Everything's been taken from you. No, you are not righteous. And Job's going, no, but I'm innocent. I haven't done anything. Okay? And they're saying, no, 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 you're wicked. That's what has happened up until this point. Elihu goes and says, who cares? What difference does it make if you were wicked? If this was happening to you because you're wicked? What difference does it make if you were innocent? Because the reality is he's God and you're not. That's his point. Verse 31. 24. He breaks in pieces mighty men without inquiry. There's my point. God does literally whatever he wants. He doesn't need our permission in order to do that. And he defines what is fair. He defines what is just, not us. Sometimes I look at things and I'm going, dang, man, that sucks that happened to me. And I feel very slighted by that. Does it matter? No, doesn't matter. Because if he said it was just, it is just. I can't look at things like he does. And sometimes that's tough for us to accept. And that's what these guys are having a tough time accepting. All right, 25. Therefore, he knows their works. He overthrows them in the night and they are crushed. He strikes them as wicked men in the open sight of others because they turn back from him and would not consider any of his ways, so that they cause the cry of the poor to come to him. For he hears the cry of the afflicted. When he gives quietness, who then can make trouble? When he hides his face, who then can see him? Whether it's against a nation or a man alone. What he's saying is God does what he wants. And when he does it, there's nothing you can do about it. If he gives quietness, who can make trouble? Nobody. If he hides his face, who can see him? Nobody. Because you don't have power over him. He has power over all. And that's what Elihu was saying there. That the hypocrites should not reign, lest the people be ensnared. For as anyone said to God, I have borne chastening, I will offend no more. Teach me what I do not see. If I have done iniquity, I will do no more. Should he repay it according to your terms? Just because you disavowed it? You must choose and not I. Therefore speak what you know. Men of understanding say to me, wise men who listen to me, Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without wisdom. Oh, that Job were tried to the utmost, because his answers are like those of wicked men. For he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hands among us and multiplies his words against God. Okay, so verse 31 through 37, this seems to me, the way that I'm reading this, is that this is an open challenge from Elihu to both Job and Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, his three friends. Especially honing in on verse 34 through 37 when he says, well, I guess I'll say it like this. It's almost as if he's telling Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, when he says, men of understanding, wise men who listen to me. And he's saying, all of you three, okay, who claim to have knowledge have all said this. You've all said, Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without wisdom. You know, oh, that Job were tried to the utmost because his answers are like those of wicked men. For he has rebellion to his sin. He claps his hands among us and multiplies his words against God. So, again, it's like I said about 10 minutes or so earlier. Elihu is not taking sides. You just saw him earlier in the chapter basically say, Job, listen, man, I appreciate what you're saying, bro, but like it really doesn't matter because God can do what he wants when he wants to do it. This is him going to Job's friends and saying, okay, you guys are supposed to be this man of understanding, and I respect you. And this is what you guys are saying. You're telling me Job is without knowledge. You're saying Job, his words are without wisdom. He's basically, again, the technique of mirroring, like I said before, he's restating their argument to them before he takes it apart in the next chapter. 35:1. Moreover, Elihu answered and said, do you think this is right? Do you say my righteousness is more than God's? For you say, what advantage will it be to you? What profit shall I have more than if I had sinned? I will answer you and your companions with you. Look to the heavens and see, and behold the clouds, they are higher than you. If you sin, what do you accomplish against him? Or if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do for him? If you are righteous, what do you give him? Or what does he receive from your hand? Your wickedness affects a man such as you, and your righteousness a son of man. Okay, so if you have ever wanted a set of verses that puts mankind in general in our place, this is it. These are the ones. If you notice in verses 4, after this initial setup in 1 through 3, he comes in 4 and he says, I will answer you and your companions with you. Look to the heavens means look above you and see and behold the clouds. They are higher than you. This is his opening, I guess, salvo in order to be able to establish God's sovereignty and our place, which is far less than that. And then he doubles down in it. If you sin, what do you accomplish against him? So he's asking them, I don't want to say rhetorical questions because they could have provided an answer, but they're basically rhetorical questions. Obviously, nothing. Or if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him? Nothing. If you are righteous, what do you give him? Nothing. Or what does he receive from your hand? Nothing. That's Elihu's point. His friend's side, from the three friends, they're saying, well, he's saying to them, if in fact Job is righteous, how does that impact God at all? Or, since, the good get good and the evil get evil, if you're evil, how does that impact God? In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't. It doesn't impact God at all. And then he turns around and he looks for Job and he flips that same argument against Job. You think your righteousness matters? How does your righteousness affect God? If you're righteous, what does he get out of that? Nothing. Your innocent matters. You think you're innocent. What does that matter in the grand scheme of things? Not really nothing. Right? And it backs that up with another scripture. I'm just going to flip real quick because I have it marked. To Isaiah 64:6. And it says, but we are all like an unclean thing, and all our righteousness are like filthy rags. We all fade as a leaf, and our iniquities like the wind, having taken us away. So this is Elihu's point. Job, you think you're righteous, bro, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And Elihu's point was very impactful because it hits both sides of the argument with the exact same logic. And I think we lose sight of that in our day to day, which is probably why man is so rebellious and our society is so corrupt is what it is. Because we've forgotten that man is so insignificant compared to God. Because we think that our position and our righteousness matters, or our accomplishments or our works matter. And from compared to God, I mean, they don't. That's just kind of how it is. He's trying to put it into perspective for you. So Elihu's argument is in fact a call of self-reflection, looking at oneself through a different lens. See, sometimes as humans, we think we're more impactful and we have more influence on things than we actually do. That's just fact, truth, and reality. I mean, I'm guilty of it. You know, a perfect example of this is there's a thing going around right now where they're arguing over, surveillance cameras. And people are having a fit. Man, I don't want to be on camera. I don't want to be on camera. You're invading my privacy when I'm going out in public place. You're invading my privacy. Is it invading a privacy? Okay, sure. Let's just say for the sake of argument, sure. But I want you to just look at it from this perspective real quick. Who do you think is going to sit and look at days and days and days and days and days and footage of people? Who's going to do that? Nobody. That's the answer. If there's not a cause to do it, meaning there's no crime, there's no nothing like that, that footage is going to go into a storage facility for 90 days. And then after 90 days, it'll be wiped out because nobody wants to pay for 2-year-old footage that doesn't mean anything to anybody. But we get wrapped up in the fact that, I want to make, because I'm this. Nobody's interested, bro. Nobody has time for that. And that's kind of, I know it's probably a poor example, but that's what Elihu is saying. He's really saying that Job's position compared to God is insignificant. So his point of trying to plead his case to God is that argument is flawed based on the fact that God is here and bro, you're like not even on the map. That's his point. Sometimes I think with Christians, we're really guilty of this. And I know we don't necessarily think of it like this. Some of us do. But sometimes I think we think that God needs us. He really doesn't. It's almost like I listen to some preachers, and I don't want to knock any preachers. I mean, that's not what I come here to do. I appreciate all of the men and women that God has called for his service, and I would not speak against that. But you listen to, sometimes you'll hear preachers do altar calls. It's almost like they're begging for God, and it's almost like if you don't do this, if you don't become friends with Jesus, Jesus won't have any friends. And it's like, to me, it puts the wrong slant on God. Because when we think we're needed, we have a different perspective versus if we're thankful to be here. See, those are two entirely different things. Okay? When I know I'm needed, I have leverage. When I know I'm needed, I have leverage over that situation because you need me. So I can kind of, hey man, I'm going to give you my best effort because I'm showing up, bro. You need me. So, hey, I'm going to give you what I can give you. You know what I mean? It's my opinion, right? It's my opinion. I'm going to do kind of, I'm going to do what you're saying, but I know you need me. So, I'll do this, but I kind of want to kind of do this, right? See, when you come from a place of you think they need you, that's your attitude. And that's all of us. That's all humans, period. Because we perceive when we're needed that if I give you anything, that's better than what you had before. Because you need me, right? But when we come from a position of we need God, then you're going to do anything to get it because you need it. You know what I'm saying? Silly example. If I had a glass of water, which I kind of need right now, but if I had a glass of water and you had a glass of water and I said, hey, I want to give you this glass of water. I need you to hold this glass of water for me. You can drink it if you want, but I need you to hold it. See, you already got a glass in your other hand. You don't need that water. So you're looking at that water and you're going, yeah, I guess I'll hold it for you. And you'll hold it for him for a minute. Then you might even set it down and just kind of stand by it and watch it. You know what I mean? Because I don't really need to hold it. Because you asked me to kind of watch it. Like, no, I asked you to hold it, but, you want to watch it. That's whatever, right? You're giving them that effort. Let's take those same two people. Let's say I want to give you a glass of water and you're dying of thirst. You going to put that water down in? No. You're going to make sure that you hold that water like it's the last thing you do. You are going to make sure that no drop gets out of that cup. Why? Because you need it. Before, you didn't need it. So your attitude toward it was differently than when you need it. When you understand you're coming from a place of need, your whole attitude changes. And that's what Elihu was trying to get both of these guys to see. Verse 9. Because of the multitude of oppressions they cry out. They cry out for help because of the arm of the mighty. But no one says, where is God, my maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth and makes us wiser than the birds of heaven? They cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. Okay, so let me keep reading. Surely God would not listen to empty talk, nor will the Almighty regard it. Although you say you do not see him, yet justice is before him, and you must wait for him. And now, because he is not punished in his anger, nor taken much notice of folly, therefore Job opens his mouth in vain, and he multiplies words without knowledge. That's a shot right there. So there's a few impactful points here. So verse 9 through 12, Elihu is basically stating in these three verses, we take for granted the things that God has already done for us and continues to do for us every day. And the examples that Elihu uses are when he says he makes us wiser than the birds of heaven. He makes us smarter than the animals. Or when it says who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth. Okay? Meaning that God didn't have to give us intelligence. He didn't have to do that. And also with intelligence, he gives us free will, which are both things that we use every day, that we tend to look past. It's almost like I don't think about breathing. I just breathe. Not really understanding and appreciating sometimes who gave me that breath. Yeah. So verse 13 through 16, which is the end of that chapter, It's basically Elihu's summary, which can be summed up to Job. His position as it relates to Job could be summed up in these three verses. And he says in the end, he says, Job, you open your mouth in vain, and you multiply your words without knowledge. And so I want to be clear here. Is he saying that Job isn't smart? No, that's not what he's saying. What he's doing is he's comparing Job, and specifically Job's view, to God and God's view. And when we compare the debate between Job and his friends, who had valid points, who didn't, if you look at their back and forth, and then you compare it now to Elihu's commentary, Elihu, again, is taking a much different approach. And he's looking at this from a much different perspective. See, to Elihu, it isn't about, is Job innocent or guilty? Is he righteous? Is he wicked? Is he getting punished, or is he, in fact, innocent? It's not about that with him, like it was between Job and his three other friends. See, what matters to Elihu is this: you guys are squabbling, and this doesn't matter. Either one of your points doesn't matter compared to the ultimate will of God. And I think for us, sometimes we get caught in our personal feelings about stuff. How someone may have wronged us or hurt our feelings. And those things are legitimate. I'm not saying they're not. Sometimes, we get caught up in our position, in our standing, in our status. And I'm not saying those things don't matter, because they do. But Elihu's message is saying we need to consider our standing, our position, our personal feelings, how we feel personally, as it relates to God and as him being sovereign. And basically anything outside of that really doesn't matter. And what it does is, when we look at how great God is, you can't help but notice, because that's just what mankind does, right? If we see a shiny object, we tend to compare it to other shiny objects, right? Oh, well, this one is, a little bit more of a blue hue here, and this one's a little brighter and all the things, right? So when you contemplate how huge God is, which we really can't, how all-powerful God is, which we really can't, because we don't understand things that don't have a beginning and don't have an end. We don't understand things that dwell outside of space and time. We don't understand things that can be everywhere at the same time always. We can't understand that because we can't do that. So we're confined to the laws of this world. He's not. And so what Elihu is saying here is, I'm not saying that your position, you're wrong to have these feelings. What I'm saying is that you need to be looking this way to help you put into perspective what you're going through. And sometimes that's good advice for us. All right, chapter 36. Elihu also proceeded and said, "Bear with me a little, and I will show you that there are yet words to speak on God's behalf." You see what I'm saying? He's speaking as if he is the mediator that Job asked for in chapter 9. And he promised it himself. I want to say it was chapter, I think it was chapter 32. It was chapter 2 or 30, chapter 3, when he says to Job, he says, listen, I'll be that mediator for you. As if to say, I'm going to kind of stand as kind of an interim step. And that's what he's been doing here, giving perhaps God's perspective, or trying to look at it from God's perspective. I will fetch my knowledge from afar. Verse 3. I will ascribe righteousness to my Maker. For truly my words are not false. One who is perfect in knowledge is with you. Behold, God is mighty, but despises no one. He is mighty in strength of understanding. He does not preserve the life of the wicked, but gives justice to the oppressed. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, but they are on the throne with kings. For he has seated them forever, and they are exalted. And if they are bound in fetters, held in the cords of affliction, then he tells them their work and their transgressions, that they have acted defiantly. He also opens their ear to instruction and commands that they turn from iniquity. If they obey and serve him, they shall spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasures. But if they do not obey, they shall perish by the sword, and they shall die without knowledge. But the hypocrite in heart stores up wrath. They do not cry for help when he binds them. They die in youth, and their life ends among the perverted persons. He delivers the poor in their affliction and opens their ears in oppression. Indeed, he would have brought you out of dire distress into a broad place where there is no restraint, and what is set on your table would be full of richness. But you are filled with the judgment due the wicked. Judgment and justice take hold of you. Because there is wrath, beware lest he take you away with one blow. For a large ransom would not help you avoid it. I got to get back to that one. Will your riches or all the mighty forces keep you from distress? Do not desire the night, when people are cut off in their place. Take heed, do not turn to iniquity, for you have chosen this rather than affliction. Behold, God is exalted by his power. Who teaches like him? Who has assigned him in his way? Or who has said, you have done wrong? All right, so I'm going to stop right there. So the first part of this, I want to say, verses 1 through 4 is usually a setup where he says, okay, I'm going to explain to you kind of what I mean by here. I'm going to expand on my points I made previously is basically what those first 4 verses are doing. And then verses 5 through, I want to say 15, he talks about, again, reinforcing God's sovereignty, right? He talks about how he gives justice to the afflicted, how the wicked's days are not prolonged. When he talks about he does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous. This is all about God's sovereignty. When he says, if they obey him and serve him, they shall spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasures. But if they do not obey, they shall perish by the sword. They shall die without knowledge. So this is 5 through 15 is all about him reinforcing the idea of God's sovereignty. Okay. Now, verse 16, he takes this general idea and he makes it personal to Job. In verse 16, he says, indeed, he, meaning God, would have brought you out of dire distress into a broad place where there is no restraint. And what is set on your table will be full of riches. But you are filled with judgment due the wicked. Judgment and justice take hold of you. That's a big statement. That's a big statement. And the reason why it's big is because, again, up to this point, Job's entire argument was, I'm innocent. I haven't done anything wrong. Yet I'm being punished. But I'm innocent. I'm maintaining my innocence. That's been his argument from day one. That's been the whole 2 months of back and forth that we've been analyzing between Job and his 3 friends. It's been, I'm innocent. No, you're not. I'm innocent. Look at you, man. You're in boils and you're in ashes and all that. That's what wicked people do. That's how wicked people end up. Job's like, but I'm not wicked, man. I'm innocent. If I could just argue my case before God, I would tell God, hey, man, I'm innocent. As if God doesn't know that. Right? So what he's pivoting to here is he's bringing up a very interesting point to Job when he says, judgment and justice take hold of you. Meaning that have your opinions been dominated by judgment, whether righteous or unrighteous? The concept of I want my just due, or I want my justice, I want my judgment. Because I believe I'm innocent, I want to go to trial. Right? You guys have all seen that, where you got guilty people don't want to go to trial. And innocent people do. I can't wait to prove my innocence. That's Job's position. Elihu's like, yeah, I get the fact that that's your position, but you're letting it dominate your perspective and you're losing the plot. You're so focused on trying to prove your innocence, you're not understanding that there's something here that is possibly a test that you could be learning. Verse 24. Did I get that right? Did I lose my place? Oh, here it is. It says, do not desire the night. Oh, there's one thing I want to say on that. When he says, do not desire the night when people are cut off in their place. So if you recall, Job was asking for death. He was asking for the night. He was saying, I want to just die. I'm in so much miserably. If you got so much misery, I just want to pass on. Elihu was telling him, that's not a good idea. Do not desire the night when people are cut off in their place, meaning killed, right? Take heed, do not turn to iniquity, for you have chosen this rather than affliction. So he's saying that if you were to choose that, that would be like you choosing iniquity rather than go through your affliction. And he's telling him that's not a good idea, bro. It's basically what he's saying there. All right. Verse 22, the conversation pivots again. Behold, God is exalted by his power. Who teaches like him? Man, it's like this guy's got some divine perspective here. Who teaches like him? What do teachers do? They give tests. That's what he's trying to explain to Job. Bro, I don't think you're wicked. And I don't think you're innocent. I don't know if you're innocent. But what I'm telling you is, I don't think that matters. Because I think you might be being taught something. Interesting. Who assigned him his way? Or who has said you have done wrong? Remember to magnify his work, of which men have sung, everyone have seen it. Man looks on it from afar. Behold, God is great, and we do not know him, nor can the number of his years be discovered. For he draws up drops of water, which distill as rain from mist, which the clouds drop down and pour abundantly on man. Indeed, can anyone understand the spreading of clouds, the thunder of his canopy? Look, he scatters his light upon it and covers the depths of the sea. For by these he judges the peoples and gives food in abundance. He covers his hands with lightning and commands it to strike. His thunder declares it, the cattle also concerning the rising sun. So verse 24 through 33, which we just read, are just simply examples of the things that God does, just some small examples of things that he does that we can't even begin to understand. And again, this is Elihu double downing, I guess that's a word. Doubling down, there you go, I knew I'd get it. Doubling down with these examples from his earlier points. And he's using other examples such as the weather. Something simple as thunder and lightning and that relationship between the two. And how thunder roars and lightning lights up the sky. And he's like, We can't even understand that. That's something that's rather simple. We can't understand that part. And he says, what's interesting is this is like rudimentary to God. This is like easy. And again, he's trying to draw the comparison between how Job feels in God's perspective. Chapter 37. At this also my heart trembles and leaps from his place. Hear attentively the thunder of his voice and the rumbling that comes from his mouth. He sends it forth under the whole heaven, his lightning to the ends of the earth. After it, a voice roars. He thunders with his majestic voice, and he does not restrain them when his voice is heard. God thunders marvelously with his voice. He does great things which we cannot comprehend. And that is the whole point right there. He does great things which we cannot comprehend. Which means that if we can't comprehend some of these things, then that would draw the conclusion that we really can't comprehend, Job, why you're going through what you're going through. For he says to the snow, fall on the earth, likewise to the gentle rain and heavy rain of his strength. He seals the hand of every man, that all men may know his work. The beasts go into dens and remain in their lairs. From the chamber of the south comes the whirlwind, and the cold and the scattering winds of the north. And by the breath of God, ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen. Also with the moisture, he saturates the thick clouds. He scatters his bright clouds, and they swirl about, being turned by his guidance, and that they may do whatever he commands them. On the face of the whole earth, he causes it to come, whether for correction or whether for his land or for mercy. Okay, so really quick. So there's a very interesting, I guess I would say, perspective that he's giving you here. So when he talks about verses 10 through verses 13, he's giving you examples of how water can take a few different forms. And he's using that as an example of God's complete authority, using water's versatility. So what he's saying is that let me explain it like this. Let's just say hypothetically you could control water. Okay. And when you can control water, you can make it freeze whenever you want it. You wanted to make ice cubes in the summertime, boom, you touch it, abracadabra, boom, boom, you got ice. But that's all you could do. That'd be pretty powerful though. You could take hot running water and go boom, and it just freezes up and turns into ice. That'd be awesome. Okay. But you couldn't make it melt. You could only turn it into ice. Are you all powerful if you couldn't do that part? Well, no. See, what he's saying there is God is all powerful, meaning that from a water's perspective, he can freeze it. He can bring it into clouds to make it rain. He can melt it, and everywhere in between. There's no limits to his power or how he uses it to fit his purpose. And that was the whole point of verse 13. He causes it to come, whether for correction, like the flood, or for his land, meaning the latter rain to raise crops, or for his mercy to eliminate droughts. He controls it. And not only just control it, he controls the purpose of it. Just, again, there's layers to this, is what he's saying. Listen to this, Job. Stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. Do you know when God dispatches them and causes the light of his cloud to shine? Do you know how the clouds are balanced? Whose wondrous works of him, who is perfect in knowledge? Why are your garments hot? When he quiets the earth by the south wind, with him have you spread out the skies, strong as a cast metal mirror? Teach us what we should say to him. Oh, this is interesting here. For we can prepare nothing because of the darkness. Should he be told that I wish to speak? And if a man were to speak, surely he would be swallowed up. Even now men cannot look at the light when it is bright in the sky, when the wind has passed and cleared them. He comes from the north as a golden splendor, with God as awesome majesty. As for the Almighty, we cannot find him. He is excellent in power, in judgment and abundant justice. He does not oppress, therefore men fear him. He shows no partiality to any who are wise of heart. All right, so real quick, I'm going to hit these last points. Verse 19, this was kind of a pretty clever shot here when he says, teach us what we should say. Now, interesting, because if you recall in Job chapter 9, Job asks, how can a man be righteous before God? And he recognized in that verse that we went through that he needed a mediator. But he was thinking of the mediator in a physical sense, meaning that he needed somebody to argue his case of innocence to God, because to him he was innocent. Now, Elihu's point here is that, okay, Job, let's just say you got that opportunity to argue your case to Almighty God. Understanding that God is up here and doing all of these things and can do anything and controls all these things. What are you going to say to him? How are you going to defend your innocence to the Almighty? He's almost telling Job, that's ridiculous. What are you going to say to an Almighty God? Even if you could argue your point. Well, Lord, I'm innocent. And I mean, like, I can't even say that, but seriously. And that's his point. And he ends this chapter summarizing and speaking to God's power and authority. It's just very interesting, I found, in going through Elihu's commentary, because we're done with Elihu. It's interesting how he goes about this argument to try to help to put things into perspective for Job. And I think, obviously, Job did not sin. The Bible says Job didn't sin. But what Elihu was trying to get him to understand is don't be distracted by your take of your innocence and your personal feelings and lose the plot, lose the perspective of where you are and where he is. You're never going to be able to argue your innocence with the Almighty, because we're all guilty. And I just find it very, very interesting that Elihu ends with that question. Teach us what we should say to him. And if you could say something to him, what would you say? And next week, Job is going to get his very chance to argue his point with the Almighty. So next week, we have God's commentary. And we'll be able to end with that. We got 4 chapters left, 38 through 42. We will get through all of them next week, and I will conclude Job. Next week, Job will give you the Lord's perspective on all of these comments. And I got to say, man, based on God's commentary, my man Elihu nailed it. As you'll see, because God provides a perspective on each and every one of their arguments. But Elihu, he doesn't touch. Doesn't say anything about it. Doesn't provide any commentary about it. Doesn't provide any critique about it. So some scholars believe that his commentary was spot on. Some think because he was a junior, representative, I guess, or a junior person of junior standing that, God didn't address it. But I don't know that. I think I look at Elihu's commentary and I'm like, man, I need some more of that. When I kind of get into my feelings and think that I'm all that and get tied up into the day-to-day and things of that nature, I need to keep into perspective, where I fit into God's universe and understanding that it's his universe, it's not mine. So, any questions on that? Thank you for watching. And may the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent one from another.